the village of San Felipe, nestled in the dense heart of a Filipino jungle, surrounded by towering palms and a thick canopy of green that swallowed the sunlight even on the brightest days. The air was humid and heavy, carrying the sense of damp earth and distant flowers, but tonight, an unnatural chill swept through the village. The shadows seemed deeper, the usual hum of cicadas eerily absent. Manuel had never believed in the old legends. He had grown up hearing tales of the Aswang from his grandmother, her voice trembling with conviction as she warned him never to wander into the jungle at night. But those were just stories to frighten children, he had always thought. Yet now, as he returned to San Felipe to care for his ailing mother, the whispered fears of the villagers had taken on a new weight. It's the Aswang," whispered his neighbor Marta one evening as they sat around a flickering lantern. Her weathered hands clutched a rosary, on her knuckles white. First the animals disappear, then the children, and before long it comes for the rest of us, Manuel scoffed. "It's just a wild animal, Tita Marta, a boar or maybe a snake. People scare themselves with these stories." But even as he dismissed her words, a strange unease settled in his chest. Over the past few nights, he had heard sounds outside his mother's nipa hut. Scratches on the bamboo walls, causing low growls that didn't match any animal he knew, and the faint, rhythmic tapping on the roof. He had attributed them to stray dogs or the wind, but now he wasn't so sure. That night, sleep eluded him. Lying on his mat, he listened intently to the sounds of the jungle, each rustle and creak amplified in the stillness. The faint light of the oil lamp cast long, flickering shadows on the walls. Then he tried to reassure himself, but a sudden noise outside made his heart jump. A wet, slithering sound, like something dragging itself across the earth. Gripping the machete he kept by his side, Manuel crept to the window. The moonlight bathed the clearing in a pale glow, illuminating the jagged tree line. For a moment, all seemed normal. Then he saw it. A figure crouched in the shadows near the edge of the jungle, its silhouette elongated and unnatural. It moved with an eerie fluidity, its limbs too long, its joints bending at impossible angles. As Manuel watched, paralyzed with fear, the figure turned its head toward him. Red eyes glowed in the darkness, and a wide, twisted grin revealed rows of sharp, gleaming teeth. Manuel stumbled back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The creature didn't move closer but seemed to relish his terror, tilting its head as if studying him. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, it disappeared into the trees, leaving the jungle eerily silent. The next morning, Manuel shared his encounter with a few villagers. Their reactions ranged from fear to grim acknowledgement. Arturo, a farmer whose livestock had been slaughtered in the night, clenched his jaw as he listened. "It's been coming closer," he said. "We found claw marks on our walls this morning. Elena, she can't sleep anymore. And Anne, she says it's watching us." The villagers decided to hold a community vigil that night, armed with torches, knives, and their unwavering faith. Emperor rituals were performed, and protective symbols were drawn on doorways with charcoal and salt. The air buzzed with tension, but Manuel couldn't shake the feeling that their efforts were futile. This wasn't just a wild animal, it was something far worse. That night, the vigil began. Men and women patrolled the village in shifts, their torches casting wavering pools of light. The jungle loomed around them, a wall of impenetrable blackness. Manuel joined one of the patrols, his machete in hand and his senses on high alert. Hours passed with no sign of the creature. Just as the group began to relax, a blood-curdling scream shattered the silence. It came from the direction of Arturo's hut. The villagers ran toward the sound, their torches lighting the way. When they arrived, the sight that greeted them was more horrifying than anything Manuel could have imagined. The hut's walls were smeared with blood, the crude charcoal symbol scratched away as if by claws. Inside, Arturo knelt beside Alina, who lay limp and pale on the floor. and her breathing was shallow, and her eyes fluttered open only briefly before closing again. The baby was gone. Manuel felt his stomach churn as he noticed the claw marks gouged deep into the bamboo floor. "It took the baby," someone whispered, their voice trembling. The villagers murmured prayers, their voices quivering with fear. The next few days were a blur of grief and growing paranoia. The creature was no longer a distant threat. It was here, among them, watching and waiting. People began fortifying their homes, and abandoning the fields and staying indoors after sunset. But the Aswang was clever. It didn't strike again immediately, instead letting the fear fester, feeding on the villagers' growing despair. Manuel, too, was haunted by the creature. He saw its red eyes in his dreams, heard its growls in the rustling of leaves, and felt its presence in every shadow. One night, as he lay awake, he heard the now familiar tapping on the roof. This time it was louder, more insistent. Clutching his machete, he stepped outside, and determined to confront whatever it was. The moonlight revealed a grotesque figure perched on the roof, its pale, the sinewy body glistening with an otherworldly sheen. Its head snapped toward him, and it let out a guttural hiss that sent chills down his spine. And before he could react, it leaped to the ground with a thud, its long limbs unfolding like a grotesque spider. Manuel swung his machete, but the creature moved with impossible speed, dodging his strikes with ease. It circled him, its glowing eyes filled with malice. Just as it lunged, a blinding light erupted from the jungle. A group of villagers emerged, their torches forming a barrier that forced the Aswang to retreat. "I've to drive it out," Archero said, his voice firm despite the fear in his eyes. The villagers began chanting prayers and waving their torches, pushing the creature back into the jungle. Its shrieks echoed in the night. But it eventually disappeared into the darkness. The following days were marked by an uneasy calm. The villagers believed they had driven the Aswang away, but Manuel wasn't convinced. He spent his nights on edge, his machete always within reach. Then, one fateful evening, his worst fears were confirmed, as he sat outside his hut, watching the sun dip below the horizon. A faint noise caught his attention. It was a whisper, soft and barely audible, but it seemed to come from all around him. He stood, his heart pounding, and scanned the clearing. The whisper grew louder, morphing into a guttural growl. Shadows shifted unnaturally, coalescing into a form that was both familiar and horrifying. The Aswang stepped into the clearing, its grin wider than ever. This time, it wasn't alone. Behind it, more shapes emerged from the jungle, twisted inhuman figures with glowing eyes and razor-sharp teeth. Manuel's blood ran cold as he realized the truth. The creature wasn't a solitary predator. It was part of something larger, a darkness that had taken root in San Felipe. The villagers' efforts had only injured it, and now it had returned with a vengeance. The creatures moved as one, their movements fluid and terrifyingly coordinated. Manuel raised his machete, knowing it was futile. And as the first Aswang lunged at him, its red eyes gleaming with hunger, he let out a primal scream that echoed into the night. The jungle swallowed the sound, and the village of San Felipe fell silent once more.